Well, thank you for joining us today. We actually got the three of us together. Elizabeth actually initiated this, and she reached out to me and to Deborah saying, hey, there's a really cool conference going on. Do you want to attend it? Where like the three of us kind of teamed up to attend the Institute of Child Psychology's conference on mental health back at the end of October. And we said, hey, let's all go. Let's kind of divide and conquer. We shared thoughts. And then we said, hey, what can we do to bring some of these thoughts combined with our own experiences to members of our tribes or folks that we can influence and support in supporting their preteens and teens. So this is the first of what hopefully will be a number of workshops that we put on together over the next however long or whatever time frame. And so since she was the one who got us going, Elizabeth is the one who gets to go first. So by way of introduction, she's definitely out in the earliest time zone among all of us. She's out in California. But when you want to raise happy, healthy, and productive kids who are prepared for whatever life throws at them today, Elizabeth Stitt is your go-to parenting coach and expert. Kids don't come with an operating manual. So if you think you're supposed to know how to parent or that it's built magically into your DNA, unfortunately, that's just not true. With over 50,000 hours of working with kids and parents to support her in her work, Elizabeth can guide parents through pretty much any situation. Parenting is tough enough in normal circumstances, and it's a skill that can be taught, learned, and practiced. Author of Parenting as a Second Language and a longtime teacher with the Redwood City School District out in California, Elizabeth Stitt brings more than 25 years of experience working with kids of all ages to the work that she does with her parents. Through her talks, workshops like this, and webinars, Elizabeth shines her warmth and wisdom to parents all over the world. With that,
thank you, Clarissa. Appreciate that. So we are all three educators. We come from education and we deal with parents. And so when we were taking what we learned from the conference, we decided that we would focus more on the education piece because it's a lot of our expertise. And we know it's a lot of what's concerning right now. So my portion is on engaging your teens as critical thinkers. And I would say that in our efforts to push our kids towards a goal of getting into college, we have been cramming stuff down their throats. We have been micromanaging their lives. And in some ways, we've done less to make them critical thinkers. There are teachers out there doing fabulous, really fabulous lessons that are getting their kids to be critical thinkers. But on the whole, we have our kids so tightly structured and we are so in control of their life that we're not giving them a lot of time outside the classroom to be critical thinkers. And so coming with my parenting coach hat on, one of the things that I want you to do is to think about how can you support them, not only for their schoolwork as critical thinkers, but in their day-to-day life so that they can cross-apply that skill. Next slide, please. All right, so first way to do this is to encourage your children's independence. And one of the hardest shifts to middle school from elementary school is making the shift from being the commander in chief of your kid, where it was appropriate for you to have sort of a tight grip on what's going on, who's doing what, when, and you're really teaching your kids how to do things and telling them how to do things. If we continue to do that with teens, not only are we inviting our teens to rebel against us, because it's built into their adolescent DNA to push us away. That's their job right now during adolescence, is to push us away. So when we continue to hold a really tight grip on them, we're just saying, okay, we're giving you a chance to even push harder against us. Instead, when we stop telling them what to do and we begin to encourage their independence, not only do we redirect that need to rebel against us, because we've given them the independence, and now they can kind of rebel or do their risk taking out in the world rather than pushing all their energy against us. But it's what begins to have them do the thinking. When we're telling them every minute what to do, they just go, huh? What do I do now? What do I have to do? Okay. We take agency away from them. When we begin to expect them to do things on their own without our telling what it's going to be step by step, they begin to develop that. And again, the teaching trend has been to chunk things down so beautifully for kids that all they have to do is to follow the step-by-step plan, which means all they have to engage with is the piece which is right in front of them. Now, for some learners, this has been super helpful and has scaffolded for them their learning and has enabled them to go through big projects. Unfortunately, the pendulum has gone too far over, and for too long, teachers are telling their kids exactly what to do for each section, when is it due, what are the things you have to do. And we're not giving kids the big project scope that says, if I want to end up with this product, how am I going to get there? We are leading them directly to the product that we want. So the next time that you want your kids to do something, rather than telling them exactly how to do it, think about letting them get in there and fail and make the mistakes. All right, next slide, please. All right, one of the ways we can support them, rather than just throwing them in the deep end, is to begin to model our own thinking, right? The educational term for this is metacognition. It's how are we thinking about the learning that we're doing or the tasks that we're doing. When we model our thinking, we articulate what are our strategies for success. And the funny thing is that so many of our strategies for success are 100% automatized. We probably don't think about them anymore. Here's the example I always use. I'm pretty sure my husband thinks that toilet paper appears like magic in the bathroom because he has no idea what my system is for getting it there. My kids, on the other hand, I had to teach them the system because I didn't want them forever yelling from the bathroom, "Mom, there's no more toilet paper." I wanted them to be responsible for knowing what it was there. So I taught them my strategy, right? When the toilet paper is empty, you take the empty toilet roll and you don't let go of it until you have your next roll put into ready to go. And there's always toilet paper under the sink. And if you've got the last roll and you look under the sink and there's no toilet paper there, you don't just throw the toilet paper roll away. You go to the garage and you get another 7 or 8 rolls to put under the sink. So once I taught my kids the system, you guys are responsible for getting toilet paper to your own bathroom. I will make sure there's toilet paper in the garage, but you guys are responsible for that. They now had the system. Did it work right away? Of course not. There were times when they were still yelling. And I had to go through and say, what's the system? What is the strategy for making sure that, well, it wasn't me, it was my brother. All right, well, kids, all of you need to come here because it's not fair to leave each other out in the cold like that. So let's go over this again. So by articulating the strategy and then training them on the strategy, they learned it. But they now have the sense of why I need a system, because it's not magic, right? So much in the household does not happen That's just magic. So we can articulate our strategies in so many ways. How, like, I don't know about you guys, I arrange my shopping list by aisle in the store, right? So that when I walk into the store, my shopping list isn't random. My shopping list is in the order that I think I'm going to walk through the aisles until Safeway comes along and completely rearranges every shelf in the store. But there's a system. And the nice thing about my system is that I can take my shopping list and I can cut it up and I can hand different parts of the list to my children and tell them what aisle to go down in order to help me get the shopping done. So as I articulate that out loud, and as I tell them, this is why I've done this, it's faster, it's more efficient, I'm less likely to forget something. I am modeling for them a way of thinking, right? A way of analyzing, oh, how could I make this part of my life smoother, more efficient, more effective, more fun or enjoyable? So we want these skills to cross over between home life and school life. All right, next slide, please. Okay, here's the number one technique for developing critical thinking in your kids. So number one, model and articulate your own strategies and your own thinking. Number two, stop telling them what to do and start asking them open-ended questions, right? We need for them to say the strategy. And when we micromanage and we tell them what they should do next, even if it's in the, maybe you should, right? Maybe you should write an outline first. We don't give them the opportunity to identify for themselves. When I want the end product, let's say I have to write an essay, what are the steps that I'm going to take to get to that essay? So my favorite question, my absolute favorite question for kids is, what's your plan for that? And then notice the pause, right? It doesn't work to say, what's your plan for that? Are you going to write an outline, or are you going to do some drawing or some cognitive mapping? What's your plan for that? No, that doesn't work. You have to say, what's your plan for that? And when you first start doing this with your kids, what's their first answer going to be? Shout it out. What's their first answer going to be? Yes, I saw Clarissa say, I don't know. I don't know.
Same answer I get from my husband.
I don't know. Exactly. Right. So this is why we wait with that expectant look that says, you have my 100% attention until I have an answer.
How long do you wait?
How long do you wait? Great question. Well, usually you don't have to wait too long because they get uncomfortable and they say, I don't know. And so here's my coaching trick. Coaching trick is to ask, well, if you did know, what would your plan be? And then you wait again. And I can't tell you how important this wait time is, because it's this wait time that really says, I'm not going to step in and rescue you here, kiddo. I really am going to let you figure this out. So what's your plan? If you did know, what is your plan? The third thing you can say is, well, give it some thought and I'm sure you'll get some ideas. I'm going to ask you again later.
Hey, Elizabeth, here's a question that Julia just asked us. She said, well, what about asking them if they'd like help?
Yes, you can do that. And I would say after 1, 2, 3, after what's your plan? If you did know what's your plan, we'll give it some thought and I'll ask you again later. Because by saying, we'll give it some thought, again, we're suggesting to them, child, you are fully capable of figuring something out. And remember what I said at the beginning, the pendulum has swung towards our micromanaging and our chunking things and scaffolding learning so step by step that they have learned not to think, they have just learned to do. And a lot of them are beautiful, really superior executioners. They really are able to execute well on the things we ask them to do. But when you don't ask them to do anything, they're like, this is the blank face. And when I talk to adults, one of the questions I ask adults a lot is, if you were hiring an intern this summer, what are the qualities that you would like most to see in your intern? And one of the words that comes up over and over and over is initiative. We would like kids to take initiative. Well, the reason that our kids are stepping into the workforce without knowing how to take initiative is because we have never given them the opportunity to take initiative, because we are always there with a plan and we've broken everything down. So what's your plan? Wait. If you didn't know, what would your plan be? Wait. We'll give it some thought. I'm sure you'll get some ideas. I'll check in later. Now, Julia, now that we've given them some time, now if they're really stuck, we can say, would you like some suggestions as to how I might approach this that maybe you could use? And I want you to hear the word might and maybe. First of all, I'm asking permission. Thank you for that, right? We're not just going to tell, we're going to ask permission. Would you like some ideas that maybe you might use? And I want to use that conditional language because I want to still leave the field wide open. I do not want to tell my child, I'm telling you what to do. So I'm not going to come in with, this is how you should do this project. As soon as I do that, the child's brain shuts down and the child's brain goes, okay, tell me how to do it. Now I'm back to being your Ottoman. Now I'm back to just following directions. So, however, they're stuck. Would you like me to share some ideas of how maybe you might engage with this project? And I would continue to use conditional language. I wonder if it would be effective to X, Y, or Z. And then you can present your ideas. Afterwards, I would still give them some think time. I would still walk away and let them go. If they're really stuck, and there will be some kids either who are so unused to thinking that they need to be trained how to think first, or kids who like very often are very deep thinkers, never get started on their projects because the problem is not that they have no ideas about how to approach something. They have 37 ideas on how to approach something. And it takes a long time to weigh and evaluate 37 different ideas and to see which one is going to be the best idea. These are the kids who, if you gave them a chance, they would turn in one absolutely Nobel Prize winning project at the end of the semester. And they would have done no other work because all their brain could focus on is that one project. With that child, it can be helpful to, one of the things you can teach them is, in life, we don't have time to evaluate every single option. So we need to put some options on the table and evaluate them pretty quickly, and then just trust, like, okay, maybe A and B would be better than C, but today I'm going to go with C. So sometimes with a child, you have to get down to, all right, maybe they're saying, I don't know if I should do this or that or that or that or that. At that point, it might be appropriate to step in and say, okay, I'm looking at ideas A and C, and they seem like the strongest to me. So I need you to make a choice. Are you going to pursue A or are you going to pursue C? And that can help narrow down those complex deep thinkers into one idea. Next slide, please. Okay, if we're going to send our kids out into the world, inviting them to take initiative, asking them to come up with a plan, we have to allow for the fact that the plan is going to fail. Big time. And one of the things that I love about middle school is that it is the perfect place for children to fail. Middle school teachers tend to be tight about things because they want to prepare your kids for high school. So, in my classroom, the policy was 10% off, every day you're late, 10% off. They had to turn in an essay. They had to sign it in when they turned it in. If they didn't sign the paper that my turn-in sheet, I didn't care if it was an A. They got a 0 because my number one rule was you sign in on the turn-in sheet. That's how I know I have possession of your paper. Was that mean? You betcha it was mean. That's great. Much better that I be mean to them in 7th grade with all the love in the world and all the affection in the world and all the confidence in the world that they're going to learn what they need to do, than that the 9th grade teacher give them the 0 for that mistake, because in 9th grade, their grades count. So the great thing about middle school, with all our middle school parents here, is that we have this opportunity to let them make the plan and then fail to execute on it, and then suffer the consequence that the teacher's going to give. And then help them, rather than you failed, rather than I can't trust you to make a plan. I need to sweep in and take over again because you've got to keep your grades up. Because after all, middle school grades don't count for anything. It gives me the opportunity to come in and really focus and say like, oh, you had a plan. And it sounded like a good plan to me when you and I talked about it. So let's go back and see what maybe you want to adjust for next time. Right? We want to teach our kids the idea that we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Just because the plan failed, the end product failed, doesn't mean it was a bad idea. It doesn't mean that they didn't do a lot that was right along the way. We just need to help them to identify what's the piece that seemed to have fallen apart and what can we do for next time that's going to make the difference. Next slide, please. Oh boy, look at me coming at 8:29 and keeping us right on schedule. Okay, so the resource that I have for you all is a checklist called the Are You Raising an Adult checklist. And it's a great starting point. It is a really great place to just look through the list and to go like, if personally, I look at sort of, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade as saying, by the end of 12th grade, I want a child who has got a 10 on all of these things on the checklist. So if I got a 6th, 7th grader, I might look and go like, right now it's like a 3 on this and a 4 on that, a 0 on that. I want to begin to look at the checklist and begin to say, how can I give opportunities for my child to take initiative and to gain some independence in these areas, take some risks, begin to be critical thinkers about these life skill areas, so that when they're 18, I can send them out the door as an adult. All right, I am open for questions.
I'm going to say you're at least pretty close to a functional adult, right? So yeah, what questions do we have? Go ahead and you can either unmute and ask. We've got a small enough crew here. I can watch as you unmute. Jenna, it looks like you turned your microphone off. Did you have a question you wanted to throw out to Elizabeth?
I do. Elizabeth, thank you so much. Where do I get a list? So I am the checklist mom. I am the mom who's like, this is what we're going to do. And then we're going to have it, work. And if it doesn't, it's because, you didn't follow the plan. And so when you said conditional language, I don't think I've ever used. So where would I get a list to ask kind of questions that would be conditional language?
Okay, well, I love that you brought this because this actually brings me to one of my other favorite parenting techniques, which is family meetings. And I absolutely love and adore family meetings because they give us a sanctified space to have an agenda where we're basically figuring things out. And so anything that there's a problem, like, okay, you guys keep screaming from the bathroom that you need more toilet paper. That's a problem. What can we do to solve that problem? So now you're in this family meeting setting and you've got the whole family there and they can start doing ideas and they can start chiming in on ideas. So what's another problem? Family, I love you to pieces, but you know what? You're not pulling your weight around here, and that's a problem. What can we do to get more initiative and cooperation from each of you? I shouldn't have to tell you every second of the day what to do. It's really a problem. What could our plan for that be? So you, in this family meeting setting, then you can begin to do it. Now, they can still create a list, Jenna, but if the list comes from them, even if you can see that it's flawed, if the list comes from them, you are teaching them the strategy of making lists, which is a great strategy, right? Writing stuff down, having a list is an awesome strategy for kids to follow. By letting them create the list and create the strategy, you let them do the thinking. And you're sitting there and you're looking at it and you're going like, this isn't gonna work. It's gonna be a week. So you let it be a week. As you come back the next Sunday or the next Saturday or the next, whenever you have that family meeting planned, and you go like, okay, guys, let's think about this week. We had a plan. Did we follow the plan? B, did the plan work? And then all of a sudden they're going to start telling you where it didn't work. And you're going to go, great. So what should we change?
Okay, I'll try that. I'll see how it goes. I probably need the counseling because I was like, this is how you do it. And if you don't do it this way, then it doesn't, so I have to get better at not being so controlling, I guess.
I know, because we're awfully good at being moms, aren't we? Mm-hmm. We are awfully good at organizing our households and being efficient and getting stuff boom, 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 boom.
Could I just piggyback on that? One of the things is if you're going to make a change in your typical procedures, it's a really good idea to warn your kids about that ahead of time, because if you implement the change at the time where you're using it, the kids are going to go, uh-oh, something's wrong with mom. So you just want to give them a heads up, and the family meeting is a perfect way to do it. And not to say something's wrong here, but to say, I think we can improve things.
Yeah, right. I mean, it could be, or Jenna, you can come to them and just say, like, kids, I want to apologize. I realize that I've been failing to give you the opportunity to figure some stuff out, and that you're old enough now that I shouldn't have to be telling you what to do every second. I'm sorry. It takes you did such a good job of training me to respond to your every need when you were a baby. I learned that lesson so well that I've still been following you around as if you were an infant. My apologies. I want you guys to be able to do things your own way more. What should the plan be? So another place that we can do this is like at a family meeting. One of my family meeting pieces that I like to use is, I call the calendar check. And so that, and again, during COVID, at least with everybody remote learning, it feels a little different. But certainly when we're out into the community more, and there are some communities where kids are going and playing, they're going to practices or going to sports games. Schools send home the notices of what are the expectations. Teachers send home lists of like, what are the assignments or what are the dates. So calendar check, I like to get everybody's stuff down on that calendar, because now we can see that, oh, Joey has Poetry Cafe on Friday, and Mr. Green said that the kids could bring in food to eat during Poetry Cafe. So, Joey, did you want to bring in food for the Poetry Cafe? Yeah, I told Mr. Green that I would bring in your snickerdoodles. Oh, what's your plan for getting snickerdoodles by Friday? Well, Mom, can you make them, please? That's not in my plan this week. I don't have room in my calendar for this week. What could you do? Wait, right? And the wait, I can't even tell you, if you guys put wait on stickies all over the house, that for me as a teacher was probably the hardest skill to learn. And I was so grateful that I had years of teaching before I had my first child to learn how to wait. Because when we jump in and do the thinking for them, they're waiting for us to give them the answer. So when we wait, so Joey, I hear that you want to have snickerdoodles for Poetry Cafe on Friday. I don't have time to make them myself. So what are you going to do? Wait. I don't know. If you did know, what would you do? Wait. I don't know. Well, I guess, could I make them? Of course you could make the snickerdoodles. What do you need to do to make snickerdoodles? There you go again. I don't know, right? Goes with the whole thing. But eventually they're going to figure out like, oh, well, why don't I go get the recipe? Why don't I check if we have the ingredients? Yes. And then, you know, maybe if they've never done one piece of something, like if you have a sixth grader who's never used the oven before, you might go do an oven check, right? Let's go over some oven safety rules. But hopefully your sixth graders used the oven before. So yeah.
Can I pop in with something here, Elizabeth? So I love what Elizabeth is saying, you know, in terms of the thought process, helping them break that down. That's something that I've done for decades as a test prep coach, where I'm teaching kids how to think when they approach a certain style of question on the SAT, ACT, LSAT, whatever. And I'm teaching them how to think, because they're not going to have this question or this situation necessarily ever again. But I always use the same question. And darn it if they don't call me after the test and say, you know, Coach, I heard you in my head on test day. And it's like, yes, that's exactly it. So if you're taking what Elisabeth is saying and combining it with, like, if you literally use the same one or two questions every single time, you are going to feel like a broken record. But they will start to think the questions to themselves with time eventually. And then that gives them, again, like that critical thinking skill. The other point that I would add in is that waiting that Elisabeth is talking about is so critical, because remember, as adults as they are becoming and as mature as you're seeing them grow into, the brain develops from the back forward, and the prefrontal cortex is where higher level thinking ultimately actually happens. It's the last bit to develop, and it doesn't actually develop until like the mid-20s fully. So the time that she's inviting you to offer your kids is time that they need. It's like you wouldn't expect a baby to run across the room super fast physiologically. And so expecting the kids to have a response as quickly as we do is an unreasonable expectation, because their brains just aren't there yet. So recognize that they're not stalling, they're not being little, whatever term you prefer to use for them. They're like, this is a skill, just like walking, just like driving, that we are teaching them in this process, and they're just not going to respond as quickly as we do. So acknowledge that you can't see that physiological incapacity, but it's there.
And part of that first step of articulating your own strategies is building up that Rolodex of approaches, so that when you say, what's your plan, their brain will start to go to like, flip through the Rolodex of ideas. And we have teachers who are doing this in the classroom with their kids with academic things, right? We have posters up on the wall that give different strategies, like to approach a math problem or to approach a writing assignment. So we want to borrow from that, and we want to build on it. And we want them to realize that strategies are transferable.
Absolutely. All right. I'm going to interject as the one who's responsible for keeping some time today. We are at 11:41 Eastern time, 8:41 Pacific. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. And when we come back, Deborah's going to take over talking about different learning styles, which is particularly applicable if you're one primary style and your kid is another and you're remote learning. Hopefully the information that she has, I know it's going to help you get a better sense of how to navigate differences in learning. So let's take a quick bio break. We'll take about 4 minutes, and we'll be back on with Deborah.
But meanwhile, you're welcome to hang out as well. I'll hang out. And if you have questions, you can either unmute yourselves and ask them, or you can put them in the chat. Would just love to hear, what's up with your kids? What are you seeing at home? Even where are your kids in terms of COVID? Are they learning remote learning? Are they in school? Is it hybrid? How are things going? And if you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, please do. And also, please let us know, how did you hear about the workshop?
Hi, Elaine Gordon. Siba was the one that sent me the email.
Who did?
Siba, Connecticut IB Academy.
Connecticut Academy. Okay. We're from all over. So Kelly, you said your name was Kelly Gordon?
No, Elaine.
Elaine Gordon.
Yep. Aileen, I'm glad you got my email. I saw your registration come through last evening. I had intentions of making sure emails got out this morning. So thank you for proving my instinct correct.
You're welcome. I need it.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so Julia made the comment that she was a step parent and really stuck between two different worlds. That her kids are stuck between two different worlds. And I was a step parent, and I was both a step parent and the mother of a child who was going back to her dad's house. And first of all, hats off to you, because I don't think there's a harder job in the world than step parenting. There's certainly not a more thankless job. And you are constantly, it's like walking in the river on uneven rocks, because you're sort of darned if you do and darned if you don't. Like, if you take action and get engaged, then you are overstepping bounds. If you don't get engaged, you're not stepping up and being the parent in the house where you are. Here's the thing about kids going back and forth between two houses. Our kids, especially our middle school kids, come to school and have 4 or 5 or 6 different teachers. And they learn very quickly that, in Mrs. Stitt's room, this is what you can get away with. And this is what you cannot get away with. But in Mrs. Davis's room, this is totally okay, but don't dare do that. And in Mrs. Constantine's room, this is how you got to do things, or she's going to get mad. So they can go from first to second to third to fourth period and have different teachers and learn different ways of doing things, and know that a different teacher has a different approach and a different style and a different expectation. Now, some kids are more rigid, and we know that for some of our learners, it's harder. And that's going to be true going between two homes as well. That finding that balance and knowing what to do between the two homes is harder for that more rigid kid. And so trust that they're going to get there in the long run. In the long run, they are going to learn to adjust to their two homes. It might just take more years. So patience and faith and persistence is going to get you there. It's a good, yeah, but it will take time. In our family, with my oldest stepson, I used to joke that, well, when he's about 30, he's going to fully realize the benefit of having me in his life and of all the ways that I was actually showing my love and support for him. And he's 27, so I'm beginning to see the glimpses of appreciation, and I'm trusting that by 30, I might actually be able to have a conversation with him where he goes like, yeah, you know, I didn't always love you in the moment, Elizabeth, but I always knew that you were in my corner and that you always wanted the best for me. So with step parenting, you really got to take the long view on things. Yeah.
All right. Well,
We're past time.
11:47 East Coast time. So let's go ahead, and we continue to have folks joining us. I'm thrilled. For those of you who either have Facebook messaged me or reached out privately, if you didn't get a chance to actually register, we are recording, and we are going to be able to send recording links to you within the next week or so. We just need an email address to be able to do that. So if you didn't get a chance to register in advance so that we had that information, just either you can put it in the public chat if you'd like, or you can private message it to me, and I can make sure that we put you on the list to get that at some point this coming week. And by the way, I did neglect to mention, it came up over chat, that for those of you who haven't had the opportunity, please do go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat window. Also, tell us where you're from. I realized this morning that the three of us who are presenting represent all 3 states in the country that start with C. Elizabeth is out in California. I am in Colorado, and Deborah is out in Connecticut. And randomly, I have lived in all 3 states. So anyway, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elisabeth to go ahead and introduce our next presenter, Deborah.
Thank you. It is my great pleasure to bring to you today Deborah Ann Davis. Deborah Ann Davis is an award-winning author, speaker, and coach with over 3 decades of experience in middle school and high school education. As a teacher, Deborah has helped countless families replace the pain typical of the tween-teen years with fostering positive and healthy relationships despite adolescent angst. She's founder of the Awesome Mom Tribe and mother herself, and she now applies her experience in education to coaching parenting skills. Armed with her sense of humor, a BS in education from University of Massachusetts, and a master's in education and supervision from Emory University, she provides guidance and encouragement for moms to help them foster positive and healthy relationships within their family. Her previous titles include How to Get Your Happy On and the Love of Fairs series. And you can learn more about her at www.DeborahAnn, no E and Ann, DeborahAnnDavis.com. And Deborah, what's the name of your mom book? Slam the Door.
How to keep your daughter from slamming the door.
How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door. And let me give a quick testimonial to this book. I have read it. It is not only delightful, and Deborah does have a great sense of humor. The advice is so spot on and so concrete and doable. Go get her book. If you are the mom of a daughter, go get her book. I promise you, you're going to love it. All right, take it away.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. I'm usually, when I do these presentations, I'm all gathered and collected, but when you started complimenting the book, I started to blush and I went, woo. So thank you. Okay, so I'm doing learning styles today, and I have a PowerPoint. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and hopefully this is going to work. So is this good? Ladies, can you give me a heads up, say yes or no? Hello?
Yep, we got you. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. I'm the only one here. Okay. So I'm talking about learning styles during the quarantine specifically because I'd say that the majority of the moms did not sign up for having their kids sitting around the house learning instead of going to school. So I want to help you minimize some of the conflicts that occur with you trying to help them with their education. Okay, hang on one second. All right, there we go. So first of all, let's talk about learning styles. What's the big deal about them? If we all had the same learning style, then there would be no problem because we would all take in information and process information the exact same way, and there wouldn't be any surprises. But we don't all learn the same way. So what happens is you'll have an adult who has a different style or process than the child, and they're both expecting the other person to interact in a particular way. And they don't get that interaction because they see the world differently. And that causes a lot of clashes. So if you've got a teacher as a different learning style, or AKA their teaching style, then the way your child learns, your child may be, floundering around when the information is something that they can handle just fine. It's just not receiving it in a way that they can optimize. And this is why it's so important, because every child who is faced with a dilemma walks away thinking, I'm not as smart as the other people. I can't accomplish what they can do. They're better than me. But the important message here is that there's nothing wrong with being different. It's only different. It's not good or bad. It's just different. So what you do is you take your style and you emphasize the things that are really good about your strengths, and then you shore up the things where you're not as good and not as strong in those areas. The thing is that this is not an excuse to say, well, I'm a visual learner, so I'm not going to worry about the other things. This is a way you identify what's actually going on with you so that you can optimize it. Now, I'm going to use 3 styles: the auditory style, the visual style, and the kinesthetic style. And most likely as an adult, you have an inkling about how you process information the best. What is your go-to preference when you're trying to learn about things? Because the way we process information impacts our relationships, the way we interact with people, the way we learn, and the way we understand our environment. So if we think that everybody does it the same way that we do, then we're not going to understand the people around us. The interesting thing is that nobody is a singular thing. Some people are stronger in one area than another, but there's a lot of overlap. I am a visual learner, majority, but I'm kind of a visual kinesthetic learner. And as a science teacher, I was really happy in my area because I got to do science experiments and I got to create all kinds of visual things for the kids to look at. So it was really easy to keep my students engaged because I did those 2 things. And of course, my auditory learners would listen. So my question to you is, what kind of learner are you? So just throw it into the chat, the type of learner that you are. The thing is that while you're doing that, I'm just going to say that you go out there online and look up learning styles, and you can find some things that talk about these 3, and some that talk about a 4th one like reader, writer, and some that have like 18 or 20 different categories. And the way I learn, I like it a little bit more simplistic, so I'm sticking with these 3. So now that you have recorded the type of learner that you think you might be, my next question is, do your children learn the same way you do? So if all the kids in your house are the same kind of learner as you are, put yes. If all the kids in your house are different than you, put no. And if some of your kids are like you and some of your kids aren't like you, put both. I'll give you a second to fill in those two answers. By the way, this is me nodding towards my kinesthetic learners. So you're doing something while we're talking here. And it's making you process this concept of learners because you are applying it to yourself and then doing something with it physically. Okay. The bottom line is we all have abilities in all three areas. But if you're going to do something, the task at hand is going to dictate which one comes up front and center. So take the simple act of trying to teach a child about books. The first thing that they cue into is their visual learner side, where they're looking at the pictures and how the colors are. And then their auditory side kicks in because they listen to you reading the words. And then as they get bigger, they want to handle the pages themselves. That's their kinesthetic side. So that makes us do everything in all directions. Now, this is modeling behavior. Elizabeth had mentioned this about modeling behavior. I'm just going to say as an aside, if you've got a behavior that you do that you don't want your kids to do, may I subtly suggest that you stop doing that behavior because they are going to imitate everything that you do. Okay. Next, maximizing your learning styles for group projects. Most kids dread having a group project at school because they don't know how to function within it. If your child understands about learning styles, then they can apply that to the group project. In a group, if the kids can identify what they're strong at, then you can assign jobs based on what they're good at. So your visual learners will be the ones who will go and do the research. They will go look up the information and bring it back to the group. The auditory learners will be the people who will take that information and turn it into something that will be verbal so that when you do your presentation, you'll have your speech, if you will. And then the kinesthetic learners are going to be taking that information and putting it into the poster or the trifold board or the PowerPoint. And so what you're doing is you're playing to everybody's strengths. So one of the things that I'm offering to you for joining us today is to have this inventory right at your fingertips. If you go to deborahanndavis.com, Learning Styles Inventory with hyphens there, then you'll be able to access this document. And this is from the Georgia State Department of Education. I like it because they do just the three: auditory, kinesthetic, and visual learning styles. So it's more simplistic for me. But also when you get there, you will have some directions on how to use it. On my website, it has directions on how to use it. Now, and also all these links will be available at the end. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different learning styles, and then we're going to talk about how to help enhance those learning styles so they can do better in school or in life. And then we're going to talk about specific things that you can do for distance learning for those learning styles. And we're going to start with visual learners. And like I said, I'm predominantly a visual learner. Visual learners learn by seeing. They need to see people's body language, and they need to see the teacher's facial expressions. And you wouldn't think that that would matter, but that's how they learn. I find that I have difficulty understanding people when they talk through the mask because somehow my mind processes words by watching the person's mouth when they speak. So be aware that that might be something going on with your visual learner. We visual learners like to sit in the front of the room. When I was younger, I always thought it's because I was short, but they like to be able to see everything directly. It matters to them not to have to sit around. So if you've got a visual learner in a classroom where they sit alphabetically and their last name begins with Z, then it's more difficult for them in a classroom to get the information and process it as efficiently. And visual learners are notorious note takers. I take notes on everything. That's how I process things. And when I go back, I read my notes over, and that helps me study. And visual learners love things that you can see. We love graphs, we love diagrams, we love pictures. We love to draw diagrams to make it so we'll understand it later. Anything that is illustrated, including textbooks, are great for visual learners. Auditory learners are slightly different. They have all the abilities that visual and kinesthetic learners have, just like visual learners do, but auditory learners learn through listening. And but when I was in college, we were in big auditoriums, you know, and the person was like a little ant down there at the front. And I had a hard time in those classes because I couldn't really see what was going on with the person. But auditory learners thrive in that setting. Auditory learners are the people who like to do discussions, and they are really good listeners. They interpret the sounds of the speech. When someone's talking, the visual learner interprets the gestures and the expressions on the face, but the auditory learners listen to the sound of the voice and the pitch and the speed and the emotion that they hear in it. And auditory learners are great with audiobooks. So if you've got a child who has a reading assignment, then like a book that they have to read for school, then get the audiobook version of it and then have them read along as they're listening to it. They will internalize and retain the information way better. Another trick for audio learners is that have them read stuff out loud while you record it. Like if you've got an iPhone or tape recorder, and then they can listen to that again later, and that will be the way that they study. Kinesthetic learners make up the smallest percentage of our population. They are the people who like to do things. They like to manipulate and try it themselves and formulate things. And that helps them understand the content. They find it hard to sit still for long periods of time, which you can help them out by not giving them refined sugars or carbohydrates prior to their school day, because cereals and things like that make them more antsy and make them want to move around more, and makes it more difficult for them to stay the course in front of that computer. And what happens is, and I know this from my kinesthetic side, you focus for a certain amount of time and then your mind starts to go to, how long do I have to sit here? How much more time is there? And you no longer hear the lesson. All you hear is in your head, how long is this going to last? And they love any kind of class that's hands-on, like this cooking class in this picture, and which made it great for science, because science classes have experiments and things like that. And kinesthetic learners love projects. Anything that they can do to create something so that you can look at it, they love that. Okay, this next section is on helping your students learn, your children learn. So we're going to start with the visual learners. If you want to have your child do something on their own, and they're a visual learner, then what you do is you demonstrate how to do it and you say, okay, now you do it. They feel more confident learning something that way than saying, okay, this is this thing, go ahead and try it. For me, inquiry-based science was very difficult as a child, where they say, just go and try it. I was not a just go and try it type of person. Show me how you do it, then I'll go do it, and then I'll embellish it and change it and experiment with it. But I never wanted to start it myself. Take advantage of educational TV shows and videos. They're out there by the thousands. And picture books are really great for visual learners. And of course, for all babies, that's for everything, but for every type of learner. But as they get older, even in high school, anything with graphics will make it easier for learners, visual learners, to retain information. And use flowcharts or collages. When I write a book, I write sticky notes all over the place, and I lay them out on the floor, and then I move them around into an order that makes sense to me. And then I stick them on sheets of notebook paper to maintain that order. And then I've got my organization set up. So your job as a parent is to show your kids different ways to organize things, and they will pick the one that matches their learning style. Visual to-do lists are great for visual learners. And I know that this picture looks like it's for youngsters, but this is still a great idea for high school kids. And if they've got school tasks that they have to do, make lists of them, checklists that they can check off. And you want to have that, especially if they've got something that's due today and something that's due at the end of the week and something that's due at the end of the month. So these checklists will help them stay on target with all the things they have to take care of. And then, yes, visual learners love to color code. My lesson plan book had one color for each of my separate classes, so I could follow them over the course of flipping pages. Now, if you've got auditory learners, I'm going to pause here for a second to just do a little commercial. Auditory learners listen. They listen to everything. If you have auditory learners in your house, then they are listening to everything that's going on. That means that when you're anxious about something that you're watching on the news, they'll hear snippets of it, but they'll hear your reaction to it. And the visual learners will look at the expression. When you're watching something that's political or something having to do with the pandemic, and you're going, or you're worried or whatever, the visual learners are walking away from that. And your children are privately being frightened and scared. So their anxiety level is going up. So my recommendation is that you broach the subject with them. You say to them, so what do you know about the way you're learning at home right now? Why we're learning at home? What do you know about the virus? What do you know about what's the attack on the Capitol? So you can ask them and they will bring up the information for you. And the other thing is your kids are getting information from listening and watching you, but they're also getting it from their friends. And the friends may not have an entirely 100% accurate version of it. So if your kids are having higher anxiety than normal, they may be worried about whether they're safe or whether you're safe or whether their grandparents are safe. So have the conversation with them. Okay, so if you've got auditory learners, find text-to-talk software. Most textbooks have online versions of them. And if you've got text-to-talk software, the computer will read the book to them and while they read along on the screen, and they will internalize the information better. And they love to listen to stories and to tell their own stories. So those stories can be things that are like history based to match the subjects in their school, or they could be biographies, but they will listen to anything having to do with learning if you give them something in story form. Rhymes and songs. When my daughter was little, her school decided that they should be learning Japanese. So she learned the months and the days of the week and the numbers in Japanese all through songs. And to this day, she can still sing those songs. And there are tons of resources out there, like radio programs and TED Talks. All you got to do is put in the subject that your child is learning at school and look for it, do an internet search, and you'll find plenty of things that they can listen to on that topic that will enhance their learning, and it'll make it more interesting for them. Also, when your child does something outside their wheelhouse, so if they have to build a project or they have to write a written report, then have them report back to you about what it was that they did, what they learned, what they understood, and then that way they will process it better. That goes the same for reading instructions. You could do it one of two ways. Either you read the instructions out loud and then the two of you discuss them, or they read them out loud and then the two of you discuss them. And last but not least, auditory learners love discussion groups. They love to sit in kibitz with other people on topics. And if you can arrange that to happen with other children in their class online, then you will be aiding your auditory learner. Now, for the kinesthetic learners, there are so many things out there that you can do to help your kinesthetic learners. Any kind of puzzle or table game or anything where they have to manipulate stuff will help them learn things. And you can find ways for them to act out books and plays that they're supposed to read for school. That will help their retention. And anything that you want to do to enforce things. For example, like in science classes, we always had to do the science safety rules before like the first week of school, and they had to sign off on them. Well, for a kinesthetic learner, acting those out or singing a song that goes along with them will help them learn that. Creating movement games that match what they're doing. You can use hopscotch for young learners for math problems, or when you throw a dice and they have to add it up and jump on the number. For kids who are doing multiple choice problems, you can put an A, B, C, D on there and you read the question in the choices and they have to jump on the choice. Science experiments go without saying, but if your science class is not set up to do science experiments because you're teaching at home, go online and find science experiments for whatever particular topic you're looking at. And there will be simple things, simple experiments and demonstrations that they can do. And everybody I know is notoriously bad at investigating their own neighborhood. So I suggest that you find things that are right around where you live and take a family field trip to something that is related to the subjects your students are learning. Okay, now for the moment you've all been waiting for, distance learning. So your child is home. And I would like to say that if your child is home or your child has just returned to school, or the child was at school and they have just returned home, be aware that our new normal is change and that whatever's going on right now may change again. So your message to your students should be, you know what, things might change again, but don't worry, we got this. If this is something I don't know how to help you with, I will find someone who does. You don't have to worry. All you have to do is be a kid and learn your lessons. So don't worry, I got this, you are good. Just keep reiterating that message to them. Now, for distance learners, if the person's up close like I am and they're looking in the camera and you can see the expression on their face, they're okay. But if they're further back and you can see their whole body, then visual learners will have difficulties. It'll be like a talking head to them. It won't help. But visual aids will make a huge difference for them on the computer. And your visual learners need to take notes and then reread their notes. They will adore any kind of handouts and worksheets. So if your teacher is not providing handouts and worksheets on a particular subject, go online and find free handouts and worksheets on that subject, printable handouts and worksheets. And you'll find that your visual learners love to diagram things and they love to work in workbooks. And when they like flow charts, they like pictures, they like to be able to work with those kinds of images that they process information in their head. Auditory learners, if you've got kids who like to listen, you're actually pretty good with the lectures coming in from school because they will listen to that and they'll process it just fine. I also suggest that you record the classes, get permission, but record the classes so that they can listen to them again later. That's the way that they'll study. Yes, you can get them to take notes, but the auditory process is a stronger one for them. Get books on tape, and when they do reports, have them tape themselves reading the report, and then they'll see things that they want to change or fix. Also, there's a lot of resources out there for people who are visually impaired. So if you can tap into their library, you'll have tons of things that have been prepared for them for school. When they have worksheets, then read the worksheet aloud, because they're not big on just messing with things that they have to write with, but read the worksheet aloud to them and then have them write the answers, or have them read the worksheet aloud and then have them write the answers. I hope that was helpful for you. And now for the kinesthetic learner. There is so much information out there for kinesthetic learners. They have a hard time because they have to sit behind the computer for a period of time. So if you can, again, get permission to record their lesson so they can do the class in shorter spurts, then you build in breaks. So they work for 15 minutes and then they go run up and down the stairs for 15 minutes, and they work for another for 5 minutes. They work for another 15 minutes and then they go do push-ups and pull-ups for 5 minutes, and then they come back. They will be refreshed, they will be recharged and rebooted, and they'll be ready to take on the lesson again. So depending on their age will determine how long you should give them before they start getting restless. So you know your kids, you know what it is that they start getting antsy. So use that period of time and change it as it's appropriate. For younger kids, they may need to get up every 15 minutes. For older kids, they need to get up, every half hour, every 45 minutes. Another thing you can do is if you've got a laptop that you can move to a kitchen counter, have them take their notes standing up. Have them listen to the lecture standing up. That way, the top part of their body can be engaged in the process, and the bottom part of the body can be fidgeting and moving around and easing their need to move. If you've got kinesthetic learners, you may find that they doodle in the margins. That is not a sign that they are not paying attention. That is a way that they channel their need to move into something that allows them to tune into what they're hearing or watching on the screen. And the other thing, if you can give them what I call interactive snacks, like peanuts or pistachios that you have to crack open while you eat them, they will crack those open and they will listen and process the material while they are doing that. And again, don't reinvent the wheel. I went online and I looked up activities for kinesthetic learners. And this was the first thing that came up. So you can go to this website if you want to, or you could just research these things online. Whatever your child's learning strength is, these are things that you can do to help them show that they understand the material and help them process the material so that they will retain it. And the other thing is, if you've got a visual learner or an audio learner, using these kinds of activities will help them be stronger in the kinesthetic area. So use this idea to process and get information for your kids to process when they're trying to learn things in different areas, because your teachers are going to have different teaching styles. So your kids are going to need to be able to step up for different styles. And also, this is not just for kids, because I'd like to say that if you absolutely love what you do for work, then most likely you have a good environment, but you have a job that is geared towards your strengths. In school, we are required to do all strengths, but when you go out into the work world, you head for the strength that is your preference. If you're in a job that you don't care for, then most likely you are in a job that is requiring a strength that you don't have. You're not playing to your personal strengths. Like for me personally, I hate cooking, hate it, don't like to do it, don't like to plan it, don't like to think about it, don't like to clean up after it. I do like to eat. So if I had to have a job as a cook, I would be unhappy. I could be good at it, but it wouldn't be what I want to do. So be aware of your particular learning style and know that you need to use the part. If you've got your kids learning at home, you need to use the part that is in keeping with your learning style as you're working with your kids. That will make for the best environment for both of you. Now, this is a unique way to use the learning style inventory that I'm about to share with you. Also, I made this little video. I'm very proud of it. I did it on software, free software called Doodly. And this is a very short video. It's the very first one I ever made. So you're about to debut it. Let's see here, play. Okay, so if you want to go take the learning style inventory and find out what your learning style is, that's great, but have your child do it too. And then when you're done, don't share the information with each other. Instead, what you do is take it again. This time you take it pretending that you're your daughter, and your daughter takes it pretending that she's you. And then after you're done with that, you can go ahead and share your information. Because what you'll find, I did a retreat with moms and daughters a few years ago, and I gave them a quiz like this to take, and the mothers figured out who the daughters were right away. but the daughters all gave the mom their version. So if the daughter was a kinesthetic learner, then she thought the mother was a kinesthetic learner. And that causes a lot of conflict. And when you have a relationship where the mothers and the daughters get along, most likely they have the same styles. And when they clash a lot, it's because in the little child's world, they think, well, my mom's going to react this way. So when I say this, so when I say, I'm going to go over to my friend's house, and my mom says, no, you can't do that. There's a pandemic going on, blah, 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 blah. The kid's blindsided because they thought the mother would react the way the child would react. So it is a great way for you to understand what's going on with your child. And if you share with them that this is one of the reasons why things are confusing, and this is mommy's style, and this is your style, let's figure out how to bridge that gap. Your child will feel more secure. And if you go to, again, DeborahAnnDavis.com, Learning Styles Inventory, these directions that I just said with the little video are on there. And by the way, if you like the video, just put a little note in the chat. So I'll see that when I'm all done with this little presentation, because I actually can't see the chat right now. Okay. And last but not least, I have no idea what the time is, so I hope I'm on time here. Everything I just covered here is one of the chapters in my book, How to Keep Your Daughter from Slamming the Door. You can get it everywhere, basically. But I will say that if you go to my website, DeborahAnnDavis.com, there's another book there that you can get for free called How to Get Your Happy On. And yes, I'm a science geek. And so at the end of it, there's a little experiment that you can do with your family about the effects of media and music on your mood. But that book is for free if you get it through my website. I mean, you could buy it on Amazon, but if you go to the website, you can get it for free. And if you are interested, you can sign up for my newsletter at, it's called Merry Meddling. It's monthly, and just send me an email at info@DeborahAnnDavis.com, and I will sign you up for the newsletter. So I hope that this was helpful, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah, we had a couple of folks, Julia in particular, she said she always thought she was visual. I happen to know her. She's one of my neighbors and a friend of mine, and she's an amazing artist. And she's like, I always thought I was visual, but it turns out she's acknowledging that maybe she's more kinesthetic. She says she never took notes. She always drew. That's how she took her notes. And I'm like, yeah, like artists, musicians, actors, athletes, we use our bodies. It's what we do.
We are combos, absolutely.
So, and then she said that she acknowledges, she recognized why she struggled in school, and she can see both of her stepkid styles. And Karen said she just had an aha moment about her own daughter.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I mean, things are going to be very different now.
Hopefully.
Yep.
Any other questions? And Julia just said, she's like, between the first two of you, I'm experiencing knowledge overload.
That's why you want to go back and look at this.
Yep.
Exactly. Or just think to yourself, take a moment, like take a deep breath. Okay, if there's one thought from each, just one that I'm going to take away, then you only have two things to remember.
Right.
That's right. If you pick one thing that you're going to do today or tomorrow, just one, and then you mess with that for a while, and then you say, okay, I'm going to go back and check out that video, and I'm going to pick another thing and do it. Because it's all about baby steps. It's not about a major overhaul in your life. Plus, if you try to overhaul everything, you'll freak out your kids.
Hey, Deborah, I have one question.
Yes.
So I love that you said that if you're happy in your job, you're probably doing a job that matches your learning style. And I know that from a professional point of view, the advice is work in your genius, work on bringing your genius even higher, go get other people, right? Go hire out, outsource the stuff that you're not good at, the learning styles that you're not good at. But as you pointed out, in school, we are expecting our kids to use all the learning styles at once. And often I find parents are looking at where is their child weak, and they're putting a lot of effort into, trying to shore up that learning style. Which in some, I mean, if you've got a fifth grader, you've got a lot more years of school where there are going to be teachers who are predominantly teaching in a learning style that might not be your child's. That argument says maybe it's a good idea to help shore up this thing. But if I'm looking really long term and I'm thinking, you know, this child is a great kinesthetic learner. This child really needs to develop those kinesthetic ways of doing things. I'm just curious what your thought is about like how much remediation energy to put in.
Well, this is my big deal. This is a very important thing to me as a teacher, watching my kids struggle. When the kids, if your kid is happy with their school situation when they're little, you say to them, and you want to find out, you say to them, does your teacher love you? And the kids who are feeling confident in school will say, yes, my teacher loves me. And the ones who are struggling or having some kind of difficulty will say, no, my teacher doesn't love me. That is a big flag for you that something's not going on. Something is going on that needs to be corrected or addressed. Now, my guess is that the teacher is asking the child to do things that the child's not good at and therefore needs to be shored up. So I'm saying that first, so it's a long way around the answer. Between now and when the kid lands their ideal job, the school system and their education is all they've got for validating whether or not they're on target, doing good, right? So if we can't get them to feel validated and feel good about themselves, they're not going to get that opportunity for that job. So for me, I am not artsy at all. When I used to draw stick figures, like I'd be doing the oxygen cycle or with a chicken and an egg, and I draw things up there with stick figures, and my kids would go, what is that? And I go, oh, you little city kids, you don't know a chicken? This is a chicken, you know. I mean, I have no art skills whatsoever. So when I was in a setting where I had like an art class, I always felt like the idiot. That's what kids do. When they're in a setting that doesn't match what their strength is, they feel like an idiot. And the two things that you can do to help them is to say, somewhere's in you, you have all of this and we're going to fix it. And the second thing you can do is to say the word yet. You haven't learned how to do that yet, but you will learn how to do it. Look at all the things that you can do. Did you know how to do those when you were 5? No. So you don't know how to do this now, but we're going to get you there. So meanwhile, your teacher needs to know that you know this material. So we're going to use this way to do it so you can show them that you know the material. But now we are going to practice your reading skills because I'm going to get you this audiobook and you're going to read along while you're listening to the words. And you know what I'd like you to do? Is I'd like you to imitate the guy's voice while you're reading along, or imitate that lady's voice while you're reading along, or pretend you're like Pinocchio's voice while you're reading along. So convey to them that, yeah, you flunked the test. So what does that mean? Test is just a measurement of what you know right this minute. So you don't know how to do that yet, which this is Clarissa's strength. She's going to talk about this stuff. But so yes, in terms of keeping them balanced in all things, yes, we do need to do that for them, because when they get the teacher who is just kinesthetic and their audio, and the teacher's going, here, go try this. And they're like, well, I don't know what to do. So we need to teach them how to approach things that are outside their wheelhouse. And more importantly, to not be afraid of the things they don't know how to do yet. And Elizabeth, you were talking about this when you were saying each year they learn another set of skills and more things that they have in their arsenal that they can use.
Awesome. So Catherine actually just brought up an interesting perspective. So again, I actually know Catherine personally as well. Catherine, I'm super glad that you're here, both as a parent and as a fellow coach and mentor and educator. She works with a lot of kids in the college admissions process, but she also homeschooled 6 kids
Nice.
So for any of you who are in the homeschooling space or who are going, how do I navigate having all of my children in the same space? Catherine is a good resource on that. But she said one of her concerns with Common Core, Deborah, is the emphasis on group work, or with the emphasis on group work, is that some of the stronger kids will get lower grades because they just don't do the social aspect as well. Like maybe that auditory, like interactive side of things. Or maybe like they don't do the kinesthetic, like create the poster assignments. What are your thoughts? And I am going to say, let's just be conscious of time and response, but what are your thoughts about demanding all students do things in every style?
The say you have a small group, and I don't know about that last sentence. All students do everything in all styles. They need to dabble in all styles. That's what I'm saying. They need to dabble in it. So when they are in a group project, you go with everybody doing what they're strong at with. And your visual learner will watch that kinesthetic learner putting stuff together and spacing things out properly. And they'll go, oh, so when they have to do it, they will have acquired that skill. And your auditory learner will also be watching the instructions when they're saying, do this and move this here and do that there. And they'll understand when the visual learner comes back with the research and says, I got this at such and such a thing. I looked up these things and I tried this, and they'll say, oh, that's what I'll do when I have to do that. So it's not that every person has to be an expert at stuff, but you can say to a visual learner, can you help me with the poster? You can say to an auditory learner, would you go to this place and look up and bring back this information? So it's not that they can't do it, but let's face it, when everybody's goal is the grade and not the learning, then you want to play to your strengths. But don't think for a second that they're not watching what each other's doing. I'm not sure I actually answered that question because I was thrown a little bit by the phrasing of the last sentence.
Catherine, you want to rephrase it? Or do we want to keep that for the end for Q&A so that we can stay mostly on time? Or what are your thoughts?
One of the things I've seen with Common Core is they are asking kids to do things in the various modalities. They want to see them master all of these different, and there's two aspects of it. Some that just are really weak in some areas. So now that's suddenly dropping that super high grade. Which I'm mostly thinking of the competitive kids or the super gifted kids that are asynchronous developed because they're maybe a couple grades ahead academically in that subject, and they might be a grade or two behind socially, and they're out of step with their peers anyway. And so those group projects tend to really hit their grades, where before they could just kind of fly through on the academic piece, but this having to do the group thing or the demonstrative thing, those seem to be the two biggest changes that Common Core made in the presentation of your skills requirements for students, and how to try to help them navigate that better. Because in homeschooling, you can segregate the social from the academic, but when you're in the regular school system, you can't as well.
The teachers need to be trained in that process because the reality is they're going to be required to do that when they get into a job. So they need those school skills. That's one of the things that's one of the reasons Common Core has gone in that direction, I believe. But the thing is that we don't teach them the skills when they go do group work. We just say, all right, everybody in the first part of the alphabet, you're in a group, and everybody in the second part of the, see if the teacher said, all right, all my visual learners over here, all my kinesthetic learners over here, all my audio learners over here. And 1, 2, 3, you're in a group. 1, 2, 3, you're in a group. 1, 2, 3, you're in a group. And then they would end up, and then you say to them, this is how you work with people in your group. Because we don't teach them that. We just say, you have at it. So, yeah.
The other thing that I would say is that in a given teacher's classroom, a given kind of student is going to do better. And that's always been true.
Yes.
It will probably always continue to be true. And that the disadvantage that perhaps like highly visual, but not socially adept students used to have an advantage, right? If they're in a very visual, very worksheet, very paper
kind of classroom, they go read the textbook and they can take the test and they're fine. And it was the social kid who needed to, or the kinesthetic kid who needed to do things as projects and to work things out in order to do the learning, who was struggling and whose grade wasn't as good. And now maybe that kid is getting a chance to come up and this kid is falling a little because it's not the strength. So I think we need to trust that it's going to come out in the wash over the long run. And that, as Deborah said, we need different skills, right? And I know that in terms of like test prep, Clarissa will reassure us that like there are some kids who are going to do better on those tests because those tests match their learning styles. And so when we've given the kinesthetic learners or the social learners opportunities in class to shine through other ways, then that's going to help to compensate for the fact that they are not going to do as well on those standardized SAT tests.
How are we doing on time, Clarissa?
We should be mindful of time because we don't want to get Clarissa. So
we're going to move. My only wrapping thought is, yes, some of this is relevant to what's going on in a traditional classroom. Obviously, our norm now is change. And so acknowledging, if your kid is more the kinesthetic learner and maybe they don't have as many opportunities, how can we supplement that at home? And so that's actually gonna be part of what I talk about. So with that, let's do a quick 3-minute potty break, or as they say, bio break. And then we'll come back and talk about some mindset. And I'm thrilled that there's a lot of consistencies with the things that we're all passionate about. So hopefully I can offer a little bit different spin on some of the things we've heard. So let's take a quick break. We'll be back shortly.
excellent.
Hey, Elizabeth, just FYI, your mic is still on.
Thank
Which
you.
is fine. I just didn't want you to not know that.
You didn't want me to start to sing.
Oh, I mean, I'm not opposed to that.
I have to say, so we should be looking for the advantages of learning from home. And definitely one of the advantages is that I can sit here with my twisty chair and twist back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And mostly I can keep it from not showing on the screen. And I have to say the other thing is that I often mute myself and I hum. Because if I'm humming while I'm listening to other people, it helps me to focus.
Absolutely.
So it is true that helping our kids find out how learning online, how to make it work for them, there are some advantages.
Absolutely.
Yes. Deborah, you're going to introduce Clarissa, correct?
Unmute. Yes, I am. Is it time?
Almost.
Almost. Almost.
All right, y'all got that? Can you see my
Yep. Yes, I can see it.
my pilot hopeful?
Start my video.
Just let me know when you're ready.
All right, just had somebody known as iPhone join us. All right, I'm good to go when y'all are. Are we good? Thumbs up, notes, carrier pigeons, whoever's ready.
Let's go.
Okay.
I would have the great pleasure of introducing Clarissa Constantine. And I met Clarissa when we went through this in November 2020 Children's Mental Health Conference. And I've been so impressed by her. So I'm really pleased to be able to do this. Clarissa is an only child who had a tough relationship with her mom. And during college at the University of Hartford, which is in my backyard, she began what would turn into a decades-long career as a test prep coach. She's helped thousands of kids around the world navigate the college and grad school admissions processes. Along the way, she's joked that she sometimes finds herself playing the role of therapist more than tutor, helping kids manage the stresses of their life. But no matter how many young adults she helped, she longed for a closer, more intimate relationship with her own mother. Unfortunately, that didn't come to pass because her mom passed away in November 2019. Clarissa is driven to help other families avoid the heartache, the lost years, and the regret she, and most likely her mom too, experienced. In addition to test prep coaching and dreaming of the ways parent-tween connection will help families, she's also a certified life coach who helps teens learn concepts like goal setting, self-compassion, and self-esteem, mindfulness, and growth mindsets. So without further ado, take it away, Clarissa.
Thank you. And again, thanks to all of you for being here. It's always cool to say, hey, here's some information. Let's do what we can to help make life a little bit easier, hopefully, a little more fun along the way. So as we start with mindset, I'm curious if you would either type to me or go ahead and come on mic. What do you think when you hear the term mindset? Because it's kind of become a buzzword. So what are your thoughts? Life perspective. Okay, absolutely. A frame of reference. Yeah, attitude, approach to life. Absolutely. Okay. All of those, I think, are key. If we were to go back to the dictionary definition, which is where I always start, is it's a fixed attitude or a disposition or a mood, or kind of like an inclination, like what's your tendency towards something? And yes, Kelly, that is exactly where we're going. If you are not familiar with Dr. Carol Dweck, there's an image in there that is somewhat less reflective than the book that I've got. You can tell it's a well-worn book. It's a phenomenal book. Basically, Dr. Dweck takes this concept of mindset, your frame of reference, your life view, your worldview, and she kind of subdivides it into two categories. One is a fixed mindset. The other is growth mindset. So I'm going to propose that if we're here today, there is at least some aspect of us that believes that we have a growth mindset, because we believe that if we can learn and we can adjust something, then things can change. But it really starts with us. So let's start and actually take a look. I know it's super small in this diagram, but fixed mindset, I actually have to acknowledge that I grew up with much more of a fixed mindset than I think my folks tried to engender in me. And we're going to talk about some why that is. With a fixed mindset, there's a belief that intelligence is set, what you're born with. You know, if you believe in God, like when God was passing out good looks and brains and social skills, you got what you got, and that's what you're stuck with. If intelligence is set, then that means that growth isn't possible. It means that obstacles are challenging and, oh, I can't do it, so I'm done and I'm just not going to try. I don't like challenges. I don't put myself out there. Effort? What effort? I can either do it or I can't. I'm either a natural or I'm not. On the other side, though, with a growth mindset, we go, hey, you know what? Maybe it wasn't just that, like, I got 1 cup of brains and a half a cup of good looks. Maybe I can shift things around along the way. Maybe I can learn. Maybe I can grow. I look at challenges as opportunities. And this goes back to what Elisabeth was saying, especially in those middle school years, setting up the opportunity for kids to fail, not because we want them to fail, but because we want to engender in them the idea that failure isn't bad. Failure is a learning opportunity, not the end of the world, right? Now, when you have a mom who I'm sure was well-intentioned, but like when I was in 9th grade, back in the day when class ranking was the thing, in 9th grade, I was first in my class. Like I was like 1 out of 143. What does that mean? And I literally remember going up to my high school, my English teacher, Dr. Bucklew. She was my homeroom teacher, going, Dr. Bucklew, what does this mean? And she's like, oh, you're first in your class. I was like, oh, cool. I graduated. I was 7th in my class. And you know what my mom said to me? Well, that's great, but why weren't you first? Right, Catherine? Like seriously, like 7th wasn't great. I still had almost straight A's, right? But in my world, the world that I grew up in, and I acknowledge now that it's because my mom wanted me to have every opportunity that I could have. And from her experience, good grades were the way to get there. But the message that I got was, you can't fail. So know that, right? Exactly. You don't win the silver, you lose the gold. You're the first loser if you're second, right? So keeping in mind that some of these things that we talk about, like we don't encourage our kids to fail. We don't encourage them to see failure as a learning opportunity. So when we start talking about mindset and we acknowledge, hey, mindset can change, in order to help our kids cultivate growth mindsets, we have to be conscious, number one, that we have a growth mindset, or at least some aspect of it. But we also have to pay attention to the messages that we're sending to our kids, because just because we have a growth mindset doesn't necessarily mean it comes out our mouths as a growth mindset. So I'm actually going to reference a couple of pieces rather than like trying to summarize it. I'm actually going to pull a couple of pieces out directly from Dr. Dweck's book. So I'm curious, how many of you have said or have heard friends or colleagues say, wow, you learned that so quickly. You're smart. You're so smart. Or, wow, look at the drawing that Julia just did. Julia's the next Picasso. Julia, I'm picking on you. Love you, friend. Or, wow, you're so brilliant. You got an A without even trying. Like you didn't even crack a book. How many of you have heard that? Right? And how many of us are like, wow, that's positive. We're reinforcing, like we're complimenting our kids, right? We're praising them. Part of the challenge, and I see Catherine going like this, right? Part of the challenge is kids hear things differently. Other people hear them differently. So part of the message that they can hear is, if I don't learn something quickly, I'm not smart. Or, oh, well, I really shouldn't try drawing anything any harder than this, because then they're not going to think I'm a very good artist. Or, well, they said that I'm super brilliant because I did that without studying. If I study, I'm not very brilliant. I'm not very smart. So part of the challenge that we need to consider is when we praise the end goal and we praise the success, like the ultimate first place, grade A, gold medal, then if they're so focused on that end performance, the second they hit a snag, they're like, oh, I'm out. Nope, I'm done. It's too hard. So what should we consider as an alternative? And to be fair, we've got primarily, if not exclusively, women here. I see this more in my students, among my young ladies, than I do among my young men. We tend to be really, really hard on ourselves, perhaps because this is the message that we've gotten about, like, it's the end goal, right? We don't give ourselves grace when we screw up. Anybody else? Right? We don't give ourselves that flexibility. We don't embrace the change. So this is something that we need to consider. We need to consider that we don't know all of this yet. We're learning. Yes, we're adults, but we clearly don't have it all figured out yet because we're still learning, and that's okay. So we want to extend this grace and these considerations to ourselves as well. So if we're going to focus more on the journey, I've got some examples here. Dancers, musicians, academics, athletes. What are some things that we could say instead of, wow, you won the race, or, oh, you had a great ballet solo? What are some of the things that we could embrace, that we could encourage and recognize in the process? Go ahead and type to me or unmute. Indeed, Elizabeth. What are some of the stepping stones we can recognize in these journeys? Absolutely, Catherine, your hard work is paying off. Good job taking a risk and trying something new. I'm really proud of you for putting yourself out there. Absolutely. Absolutely. We could say, exactly, Jenna, you finished. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely, Elizabeth. So when I look at these, and these are some experiences that I've had. I was a dancer when I was a kid. I'm a musician. I'm a runner, frustrated runner, but a runner, right? If you have a dancer or an actor or musician in your life, wow, I loved the passion that you put into your practice or your rehearsal. Or wow, I'm listening to your scales and it sounds like your fingers are learning how to play your scales better. And it feels like that's becoming more comfortable for you. Or wow, I love the fact that, yeah, you didn't win the race, but you know what? You made it to the gym 4 days a week for the last 7 weeks. And I can tell how much more confident you are going up to the starting line. So I really encourage you to consider, what are those process-oriented pieces that we can acknowledge, right? And what about for us? Like, I'm sitting here, it's New Year. One of my goals was to try to get a little healthier, drop some weight. The darn scale isn't moving, but you know what I'm acknowledging myself for? That I've done yoga. I have done a downward dog every single day this year. And you know what? The scale will move someday. And if it doesn't, I've still done downward dog every day this year, right? So acknowledging the process and looking at the pieces that will, the pieces that we know will ultimately get us there. Thank you, Elizabeth. Granted, it was 1 o'clock this morning and I said to my husband, I haven't done my full yoga practice because of course, in typical me style, I finished this last night and I'm like, I'm going to do my downward dog. And so I did it right next to the bed, but I did it. All right. So again, thinking about the journey, right, Deborah? Thank you. So we also want to think about messages that we send when the kids around us don't see the success that they would like. So Dr. Dweck gives an example in here of a 9-year-old, reasonably new gymnast who goes to her first meet and doesn't place, doesn't win, she showed up, but she didn't win anything, which of course is devastating for a 9-year-old. And so Dr. Dweck gives 5 examples of how we could respond to this. The first one, tell her that you thought she was the best. Well, the challenge with that is she's going to be like, yeah, whatever, but the judges didn't. So mom, dad, coach, whatever, your opinion kind of doesn't matter. The second that she offers, Dr. Dweck offers, is to say, well, you were robbed. What do you think the challenge is there? I can see Catherine going like, oh, no. Well, the challenge there is that you're taking the responsibility off of the student. Maybe she wasn't robbed. Maybe she just wasn't that good. Exactly. It's making it somebody else's fault. A third option is to say, well, gymnastics isn't that important anyway. Here's the thing. And that's something I actually remember my mom saying, and I know it was well-intentioned, but the catch is, if it's something that they didn't succeed at and you tell them that it's not that important anyway, the message that we're sending is that trying something new doesn't matter. And that if they're not naturally good at it and they don't naturally walk away with the gold, it's not worth doing. So be cognizant of that. Fourth option is be like, well, I know you can do it. I'm sure you're going to win next time. Well, what makes you so sure I didn't win this time? And so there's an aspect where that can undermine your relationship with the kid. And by the way, when I say your kid, to be clear, I'm actually not a mom, but I've been a coach. And so when I say your kid, I don't necessarily mean like your child, but your stepkids, your mentees, the kids that you coach. Know that I use that like broadly, okay? Dr. Dweck proposes it saying, well, I'm sure you're going to win next time, is actually potentially the most dangerous of all of these. because she says, does it automatically take you where you want to go? Does the kid learn from the process? Does the kid think like, well, I'm just going to get it next time? Probably. And so that's a really dangerous step that we want to take. So if you had to guess, what do you think a more appropriate or more effective response might be when you have a kiddo who doesn't achieve their goal? Any thoughts? Yeah, absolutely, Deborah. Going, hey, you know, what went well? Again, in that process, did you show up at the gym four times a week for 7 weeks? What did go well? Identifying, you know, what worked and what we want to recreate. Here's what she actually says. Be honest with your kid. That they didn't earn it yet. They didn't deserve that gold yet. Because, hey, there could be other kids. Maybe you've only been doing gymnastics for 6 months or a year, but there's other kids who've been doing it for 5 years. They've developed their skills more. Maybe you only went to the gym twice a week outside of going to the gymnastics studio. Maybe you need to go more frequently. And yeah, it's hard to be like, but you don't deserve it. But if we encourage the idea that it can still be attained, then that can help them increase the likelihood of trying again. Now, it's also interesting that there are some cultural aspects to this. In our culture, failure can be very, very demoralizing and demotivating. And yet, if you transition and consider, for example, some Asian countries, Japan, China, Korea, education is highly, highly, highly revered, highly valued, and very like culturally prioritized. In those cultures, academic failure is a huge motivator because they're like, oh, I didn't put my best in. I want to go do more. So recognize that there are also other cultural implications, like Elisabeth and Deborah have talked about, like what's going on in the classrooms. But to the extent that we have influence in our little microcosms, we can help adjust that as well. So it's really important that we look for evaluating the process. And this is something I see that Deborah had mentioned. I do test prep. Not only do I work with high school kids on SAT and ACT for college admissions, but I work with grad school bound students. Lately, I've been teaching or coaching a ton of LSAT, which is the law school admissions test. And I see this in my 25 and 30 and 40-year-old students. You know, it'll be like, you know, I give them a short drill and they're like, oh, I only got 3 out of 4. I'm like, dude, that's 75% accuracy. You were at 25% accuracy 10 minutes ago. And you're at 75% accuracy now. Look at the growth. And they're like, but it's not perfect. Oh my God, you're a grown adult. And so that's why I say, like, acknowledge that we fall into this as well. Remember that, especially once we have our kids in that middle school into high school range, like Elisabeth was saying, you know, we're not the automatons or the autocrats anymore. We're not dictating things. We're adjusting more into modeling and coaching and mentoring as we are directing. And so the more that we can work to not bring judgment in and to use the opportunity to teach and to learn from, and like Elisabeth was saying earlier, you know, Jenna, you were like, well, how do I approach this? And Elisabeth was like, well, maybe acknowledge to your kid that you don't have it perfect and be like, it's okay, I made a mistake. That vulnerability to your kids shows them it's okay to be human and it's okay to make a mistake. And that you know, if it's okay for us to make a mistake, it makes it more okay for them to make mistakes as well. And just be like, hey, we're all learning. Cool? Thoughts? Okay, Jenna, I see you grinning. Any thought coming out of your head that you want to share?
I used to say to my daughter, oh, I just made my very first mistake ever. And she'd go, Mom, you make mistakes all the time. I go, oh, okay, no big deal. So she understood that making mistakes didn't really alter who I was or what I was doing or my mood.
Mm-hmm. Good, love it. No worries, Kelly, thanks for joining us. Okay, so one of the things that I want you to consider, and this very much comes from my own experience and keeping in mind, like in my coaching, that I do with families and teenagers and parents, it's a lot about how to maintain connection with your kiddos. Because if you can maintain those stronger ties, then it makes navigating a lot of these difficult things easier. I'm not going to say easy, but easier. And I would argue that any of us in mentorship, parental coach roles, we want what's best for our kids. What comes up though is that our definition of what's best doesn't always match the kid's definition of what's best. Have we ever seen this? Perhaps you lived it as the teen. That's certainly what I did. And this is where a lot of what Elisabeth was saying of like asking them. One of my favorite words or favorite phrases is tell me more. Or why is that? Or what if, like asking exploratory questions to get the kids sharing more about them. Here's why I invite you to consider this. And again, this is 100% from my own experience. I believe my mom 100% wanted what was best for me. Her definition of what was best for me and my definition of what was best for me frequently did not align. And what ended up happening, you know, Elisabeth and Deborah were talking about like this, right? That happens in those teenage years. Unfortunately for us, we ended up continuing on spending so much time, effort, and energy trying to prove that what we believed was right or what was best was right. And we lost the ability somewhere along the way to be kind in that process because we were so emphatic trying to prove that we were right. And so this speaks to one of the things that Dr. Dweck discusses about we love you, but only on our terms, only if you fit into this box. And so I encourage you to consider, and I actually was interviewed for a podcast called Blended on the Bluff a couple of weeks ago. She specializes in working with blended families. And she has a very strong faith-based approach to it. And I said, you know, one of the things that, we were talking about, one of the things that can come up is that oftentimes we're teaching kids morals and values based in our belief system. And that's exactly what my mom did with me. And what I felt was missing was the fact that she would love me anyway, even if I stepped out of that, even if I made a mistake, even if XYZ outside of her box. So I encourage you to consider what boxes perhaps we have defined for our teenagers in terms of, you know, conditions based upon, you know, them in some way feeling that our love or support or rah-rah cheerleading is conditional in some fashion. So be aware of that. Just consider it in the messages that you're sending to folks. TED Talk. I don't know which TED Talk. Okay. All right. So one little tidbit that I think Catherine might be the only person who knows here, and you might not know that either, Catherine, is I actually was a personal trainer for 8 years. Catherine said no. I've known Catherine since we both lived in San Diego like 17 years ago. No, that was a podcast I was on. So I was interviewed just a couple of weeks ago. It's called Blended on the Bluff is the woman who interviewed me. So I was a personal trainer. I also openly acknowledge, publicly discuss the fact that my husband and I both deal with diagnosed mental illness. And so going back probably a decade or 12 years, I started doing a lot of research on the brain-body connection. Now, you're probably going, what the heck does this have to do with mindset? Well, let's lay a couple of foundations, first of all. Here are some numbers about what's going on here in the US as of almost 2 years ago. 1 in 5 teenagers qualifies as obese in this, or at least overweight in this country. That's a lot. But of course, we always look at it from the physical side of things, right? But what about the mental side? What about not just the mental health, but the actual academic side of things? So in going and doing research, according to the National Institute of Health here in the US, numerous studies have shown an inverse relationship between obesity as measured by BMI. Now, I will acknowledge that BMI is imperfect, but it is a measurement tool. But they've acknowledged an inverse relationship between being overweight or obese and grades, right? So what does this tell us? Well, it's not necessarily causative, but it's at least correlative in that there are physiological things that go on when we have more weight on our bodies that absolutely impact our brain. How many of you recognize that a lot of us walk around like we're a society of bobbleheads? Like we acknowledge what's going on up here, but we don't necessarily recognize how what's up here attaches to what's down here and how they play together. So I absolutely 100% agree, Deborah. A lot of concern comes from fear. So when we start then looking at the relationship between being overweight and obesity, certainly it makes sense that there are psychological impacts, right? When you've got the big kid, or frankly, the underweight, the small kid, right? That's who my husband was when he was in high school. You get the bullying, you get the nastiness, you get the, hey, fatty, or like the really, truly like horrid things, right? Oh, Julia, hang tight on that. We'll come back to that, okay? But here's the thing. Not only do we end up with the bullying, the low self-esteem, we also find that the psychosocial impact is that kids tend to lose the idea that things will be okay, that things will work out. So like you were talking with blended families earlier, Elizabeth, about like taking the long view. Kids don't have that. They just don't have the capacity to do that. So again, we don't necessarily know like which came first, the chicken or the egg, whether it's the bullying and the abuse and such that leads to the physical increase in weight or the physical increase in weight that leads to the bullying, but it really does become a cycle. So when we look at this and we think about like, hey, how does this play into mental capacity? Well, this is where another one of my favorite books comes in. If you have not read this, I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage you to do so, not only for your kids, but also for yourselves. Dr. Rady, as you can see, is a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. Exercise is the single most powerful tool we have to optimize brain function. And so what do we have going on today with the pandemic? Kids sitting in front of screens a lot, kids not getting out, kids not moving, likely driving each other crazy, possibly fighting with siblings more. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we're not getting the movement, even just getting up and moving classes. One of the most fascinating studies that Dr. Rady references in here is actually out of a school system in Naperville, Illinois, where they implemented period 0 hour PE. Basically, it's like the kids would come in and get exercise before school. Now their requirements, they all used heart rate monitors and they had to stay between 80 and 90% of their theoretical maximum heart rate, which here's the thing, you can't judge without a heart rate monitor. And they even acknowledge in discussing the study that kids who look like they're just trudging and not really doing much could actually be working at that high of a heart rate level. And what they found was that the kids who were in the 0 period PE class showed a 17% improvement in their reading and comprehension in a longitudinal literacy study that they were conducting, compared with less than 11% improvement of the kids who didn't participate in period 0 PE. The kids who were in it and at least did like a mile, 10, 12, 15 minutes at 80 to 90% of their theoretical max saw at least 50% more improvement than the kids who didn't. So of course they weren't going, well, why? What is that? So I'm not going to get into the full biology on this, which I could totally nerd out on, but how many of you have heard of neurotransmitters? Okay, they're the magical things in our brains that like send messages back and forth. Okay, these are some of them. Like you may have heard, serotonin. If you can't sleep, you may have a serotonin deficiency. So if you take serotonin at night, it can help quiet the neurotransmission and such, and it'll help you go to sleep. Many of our mental health related medications are focus in on one or two of these. And I'm not going to say that medication is inappropriate. That would be highly irresponsible of me to say. Reach out to your medical professional if that's something that you're concerned about. What I can tell you is that physiologically, exercise balances out the hormones and the neurotransmitters. So it can be a contributing factor to balancing all of that out. Well, here's the thing. If your neurotransmitters are balanced, they are neurotransmitters. They help the information process more effectively. If the chemicals in our brains are better balanced, messages are going to transfer more effectively. Make sense? They've also identified, oh, very much, Deborah, very much. They've also noticed in studies that as the amount of cardiovascular exercise increases, the amount of brain-derived neurotrophic factor also increases in our brains. Now, BDNF is critical to our ability to learn. And in fact, a study done in Germany that Dr. Rady references back in 2007, but they did a study. They had folks try to memorize vocab words before exercise and then after exercise. And what they found was that after even 15 minutes of exercise, the study participants learned vocab 20% faster than they did beforehand. So I tell all my students, and of course I always put, hang on, I always put the legal schmeagle on it of like, check with your medical professional to ensure that exercise is appropriate for you, okay? But assuming that it is, I tell all of my students that I expect them to go out and go for a run or get on the elliptical or get on the rowing machine and hit it hard for 15 minutes before they come into class. Number one, they're going to be more awake, but number two, they're actually putting their brain in a physiologically more advantaged state to learn. Or downward facing dog, indeed. All right, couple of other things and then we're going to wrap it up here. Mindfulness. How many of us could use a little more practice of being here now? Okay, now everybody thinks, oh, that's yoga. I don't meditate. Okay, fine. But how many of us couldn't benefit from this? Right? Breathing deep. Here's another really good book. To be fair, I have not actually finished reading it. I borrowed it from the library. I liked it so much. I bought it on Amazon because I wanted to write in it and mark it up. And I haven't gotten all the way through it yet. But much of what this author references, and she actually, she wrote the book with her kiddo. Her kid dealt with debilitating anxiety. And much of this is what she's learned in the process. And there's a lot of really good strategies that you can implement now to help mitigate or help minimize the potential of having your kids deal with anxiety. It's called Understanding Teenage Anxiety by Jennifer Brown with an E. All right, and so one of the short strategies that I'd like to share with you is this. When I ask you, where are your lungs? Where would you typically point? Oh, good, a couple of you are down here. Most students tell me, oh, it's up here, right? They think of like above the girls, as it were, right? But in fact, they are below, on the sides, and even in our backs as well. So I want you to imagine that your lungs are like a balloon. And as you breathe in, imagine the balloon filling in all directions, front, back, side, dropping down. And then when you exhale, that balloon is shrinking. If you consistently, intentionally practice this, 3 to 5 breaths 3 times a day, I would bet that you're going to find your overall levels of stress come down and your ability to manage them goes up. That is an example of mindfulness. It's short spurts of giving your brain a break. I am also a huge fan of this resource. I start every one of my classes with this. If you're in my Facebook group, I've had some pictures of this. This is actually created by a friend of mine at sayitwithgratitude.com. And it's literally a card deck with all these fantastic resources of just questions that you can just ask at the dinner table or ask, you know, while you're out for a walk with your kids or something. Because here's the thing, studies have shown that gratitude increases the happy hormones in your brain. And you cannot at the exact same time be both happy and sad. Granted, the happiness may feel fleeting, but if you can at least take 2 minutes and be like, hey, what am I grateful for? What it ends up doing psychologically is you recognize that much of many of the things that you're grateful for actually come from outside of you. So it helps you gather an appreciation for the people in your community, for nature, for the fact that an animal gave its life for you in order to have a hamburger, or that there's a farmer who grew the grain that created the bread that you're eating. It gives you a stronger sense of community. It can help increase feelings of confidence or belief in a higher power, all of which can contribute to overall better minds, basically. Okay. The last thing that I think is really, really, really important in cultivating a mindset for success is having a community and having a connection. I'm in a Facebook group with a life coach who she posted last night. She was like, who do you go to when you have questions or when you need support? And a couple of people were like, oh, my one best friend or my one this person. And I stopped and I started thinking about it. And I was like, my goodness, I didn't even realize it, but I am so grateful that I have created such a community of people around me that I can lean on. Here's the biggest thing I want you to understand as moms. You are not alone. I don't care what you're going through. You are not the first person to go through it. You are not the last person to go through it. You are not the only person going through it right now. So look for those places. Elisabeth has a phenomenal Facebook group for middle school moms. Deborah has a Facebook group, is an awesome mom tribe. I'm the founder of the Parent Tween Connection. Facebook groups, local groups. I know local groups are a challenge right now because of the pandemic, but find people where you can go and ask for help, because you don't have just one friend that you turn to for everything, right? If you don't yet have that tribe, there are people there who can be that for you. Find them. Because that way, when you're in that moment of doubt, that moment of being down, that moment of, I don't know what I'm going to do with my stepkids, right? You can reach out to Elisabeth and be like, dude, you're a stepmom too, help, right? We just had something last night in my Facebook group where a parent came in saying that she's struggling with her transgender son and she doesn't know what to do. I happen to know a mom of a transgender individual. I reached out to that mom and I was like, hey, there was a post in the group. Can you go offer some support? Like, I want to make sure that you saw it. And she totally did and was like, hey, I'll get on the phone with you. I guarantee you are not alone unless you let yourself stay alone. Don't do that. That's not good for mindset. Okay. So that's my perspective. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to say, hey, feel free to connect with me. I know some of you I'm already connected with. There's my email, my Facebook group, and as a gift for anybody who's interested, if you are interested in doing some exploring on how to have a better connection with your kids, that is my specialty outside of the test prep world. Happy to chat about that. And then my final request is, and actually I'll copy and paste this. If you got value out of today, it would really be awesome if you would be kind enough to share on your social media, share the link. We are doing this exact same workshop tomorrow, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern, out to 11 o'clock Pacific. So if anybody missed it, or you know, folks,
on my calendar, is it really 11?
Oh, did I say that wrong? I don't know. What time is it tomorrow?
I hope that it's noon tomorrow, but I'm gonna go check.
I'll confirm it. Yeah,
Mine-
maybe I might have said that wrong.
I've got it at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, perfect. I was wrong. 3 o'clock Eastern Standard, noon Pacific. I'll show up when my calendar tells me to show up. And yes, I absolutely agree. You know, I completely forgot to put that in there. That is one of the foundations of the programming that we do through Parent Tween Connection is volunteerism and philanthropy and giving back. 100% agree on that. Cool. Thoughts, questions? I'm going to go find that link. Go ahead, Elisabeth.
Fabulous. That was really fabulous. Thank you, Clarissa.
Thank you.
So much interesting information there.
Yeah, you know.
What's so interesting is that how we all come from different backgrounds and we all believe the exact same stuff.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Well, there's a link to the Facebook. It is one Facebook event for today and tomorrow. And if you do feel comfortable sharing, please do ask folks to actually register on the Parent Tween Connection website so that we can get them, we can email them with the link for tomorrow's event. The actual Zoom link for tomorrow is a different link than today's. So if you could just put a note, like make sure to register, that would be great.
And
Also, if that you did get a little overload, you're welcome to come back tomorrow.
yes,
Indeed.
a real glutton for punishments.
We'll be here. My dad's coming tomorrow.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love it. John.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks.
At the same time, if there's something that was missing today, you can put it in the chat to everyone or privately, because we are doing it tomorrow. So we get a chance to do this all over again. So
Exactly.
if there's something that you thought that we didn't talk about that you thought, oh, you know, it'd be really good to add, we'd love that feedback too. Thank you.